Gregg Jarrett, let's start with you. The whole premise of your book pretty much was corroborated today right there for the world to see. And, yes, we still have people that live in denial in a conspiracy world, but it just is not happening.
Yeah, there'll always be people like that. It's easy to make up a lie. It's even easier to purvey the lie. What's really hard is to uncover the truth. And now we've done that. And today, nothing changed. There's still no collusion, insufficient evidence to prove an obstruction offense. What struck me more than anything else is that Barr said openly today that he was mystified. He never understood and still doesn't understand why Robert Mueller didn't do his job by reaching a conclusion on obstruction. And in fact, he said it was unclear to me. We didn't get a clear understanding of Mueller's reason as to why he just didn't do his job. He said it was very strange. And then Barr went on to say, look, we're not in the business of exoneration. And he said, we didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to establish obstruction. And he went through each and every one of the claims of obstruction that Mueller tried to peddle and disabused all of them.
All right. So, well, first let me get David's take, because, look, you guys know this case so well. I just want your general thoughts, because there's so much here to digest.
Yeah, I want to say that I think there is a fully explainable reason why Mueller did what he did. I think that they came to the conclusion there was no obstruction of justice. That's clear by law and by fact. And that for people like Weissman, it wasn't palatable to say that after all of these millions of dollars and after all of this time and after all of his and their anti-Trump bias and agenda, they couldn't come to Hillary and tell her this is what we found. They couldn't look their friends in the face and say we found no obstruction. It's reckless to do what Bob Mueller did in that regard. They should have given a full, clean bill of health on obstruction. There was no obstruction as a matter of fact and law.
Well, there's no obstruction, but we do have a list of things that the Attorney General said today that should be shocking and alarming to a lot of people here. For the Attorney General of the United States to say that basically he's investigating Hillary-Russia collusion, and for the Attorney General to announce he's looking into the rigged investigation into Hillary, which we now know that was rigged. And the evidence in that case was overwhelming, and the intent when she deleted and bleach bit and beat up devices and removed SIM cards, there was an intent to destroy evidence for the underlying crime. The very things the liberal media was saying about Trump, I would say that this is a disaster for all things Democrat, and how far up the chain it goes in the Obama White House as all of this happened on their watch, Gregg Jarrett, is going to be fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. He vowed to investigate wrongdoing among top officials at the FBI and the DOJ. And he specifically named certain things, abuse of the FISA warrant, how the FBI and the DOJ learned the Steele dossier and how Hillary Clinton was paying for it. He at one point in time, Barr said today, we've got to stop weaponizing. Using the Justice Department to weaponize political differences. And that was a very telling statement. That tells you that Mueller knows that that's what people like James Comey and Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, John Brennan, James Clapper did. They took their positions of power, and for political reasons, they decided to target Donald Trump. And it's unconscionable, and frankly, as I lay out in my book, it's illegal. Numerous crimes committed.
Well, all of which is true. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, I hope that Mr. Barr is serious, because we almost had, I don't mean to overstate the matter, we almost had a coup through the Justice Department. Remember what that agenda was, to overthrow the president. This is the Justice Department. Unless Mr. Barr really gets a serious investigation going into what started all of this and what went on at Justice, it could happen again. We can't take that in this country.
Well, we can't take it. And by the way, it is scary for the entire country if, in fact, that happens. That's there's a danger here. There's a danger for the entire country in all of this. And I think that, especially, look, what do you both think of the notion? We now know. I can't imagine any scenario if the Grassley, Graham, and Nunes memos are remotely accurate. The fact that the FISA application consisted of a bulk of information full of, Russian unverified lies, omitting or lying by omission, committing and conspiring to commit fraud in other ways, but lying by omission that Hillary bought and paid for it, not putting it in big, bold letters to the FISA court judge in the FISA application. I cannot imagine, if we have equal justice under the law, Gregg Jarrett, that anybody is going to get a pass on that.
They will not. There were 5 big lies in the dossier. The judges weren't told that Hillary Clinton's campaign had paid for the dossier. They weren't told that Christopher Steele had been fired for lying. Instead, Comey and Yates in the first application said, he's credible. All other applications said the same thing. They knew he wasn't credible. The judges weren't told that Steele had this virulent anti-Trump bias, that he was desperate to stop Trump. And judges weren't told that the evidence that they presented was never verified. That, under the Woods procedures that the FBI established, is a clear violation. And finally, judges were never told of the exculpatory evidence that the FBI had of Carter Page's innocence, not to mention Papadopoulos, who was also mentioned in one of their applications. So, these judges were lied to. That's a fraud on the court. It's abuse of power. It's obstruction of justice, and several other felonies.
It also specifically violates the court's rules. Listen, the FISA court aspect of this is only one aspect, but it's as serious as can be. This is the most secretive and intrusive court in the land. The court should become proactive. They should demand answers now. They should convene a hearing and consider contempt proceedings.
But they also, it even goes deeper than that, because it wasn't one application. There were 3 subsequent renewal applications. And as time went on, they still were relying on this particular Hillary dossier, which now the Attorney General is looking into whether or not Hillary Clinton entered into all of this bought and paid for Russian lies paid for by a foreign national. And, there's rumblings that Christopher Steele met with a lot of people in America at very strategic times. That means the foreign national's influence in our election on multiple levels.
Yeah, isn't it always interesting that it's the people who engage in wrongdoing that accuse others of doing so? And this is the perfect case. It was Hillary Clinton who was colluding with foreigners, a British spy as well as Russians, using Russian information to damage her rival, feeding it to the FBI. And it's always perplexed me how the Department of Justice and the FBI simply overlooked all of that, and so did Mueller in his report. Nary a word about that, and he surely ran across incriminating information. But now Bill Barr seems absolutely determined to get to the bottom of it. I know Lindsey Graham certainly is, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, as we saw him today. So, this story is only half over. The important half is ongoing right now.
All right, stay right there. Gregg Jarrett and David Schoen, some breaking news and also reaction to the hearings today. We have John Solomon coming up. All right, as we roll along, 800-941-SEAN, toll-free telephone number. You want to be a part of the program. Anyway, we continue with Gregg Jarrett and David Schoen. All right, final thoughts. Where's it going? David, you're here with me. Where's it going?
It sounds like Bill Barr is very serious now about going forward. He has to be. The country requires a full investigation as to how we got there and where we're going from here. The same people who were involved, Hillary Clinton, Jim Comey, all of these, show their arrogance every single day with their public statements. They haven't gotten the message.
Gregg Jarrett.
I agree 100%, and I'll add 2 other things. Barr said he was deeply troubled that the Trump campaign was never given a defensive briefing. He said, I can't fathom why that did not happen. He knows the reason. They were setting him up. And the second is that Barr didn't back off his usage of the term spying.
No, he embraced it.
He said it's not a pejorative. It's a good English term. And he said that he thinks it wasn't just the FISA surveillance of Carter Page and an undercover agent, but he's looking into other spying. I guarantee you when he starts turning over those rocks, he's going to find a lot of worms.
Who might get indicted? Quickly.
They need to follow Gregg's book. Gregg's book gives them the roadmap.
I'll tell you what.
I think the people
we're going to. You know what? Why don't you guys stay on, because we have still so much to get to, and John Solomon's going to join us, get his take, and also some breaking news and stories he's working on. All right, as we continue our coverage, the Barr hearings. Wow, what a day this has been! Unbelievable.
Standing up for what's right with America. We're back on the Sean Hannity Show.
Have you already tasked any staff to look into whether spying by the FBI and other agencies on the Trump campaign was properly predicated? And can Congress expect a formal report on your findings?
Yes, I do have people in the department helping me review the activities over the summer of 2016.
Okay. I suppose it depends on what conclusions you come to, but is there any reason why Congress wouldn't be briefed on your conclusions?
It's a little early for me to commit completely, but I envision some kind of reporting at the end of this.
All right, that was from earlier today. That was Senator Grassley of Iowa and the Attorney General Bill Barr. We continue with Gregg Jarrett and David Schoen. Adding to the mix, our friend John Solomon, investigative reporter, executive director of The Hill, and just literally breaking seconds ago, an investigative piece, Nellie Orr's. I mean, this sounds pretty blockbuster. Nellie Orr's hi honey emails to DOJ about Russia collusion, and I'm reading it, literally fresh off the presses now. John, welcome back to the program. Before I get to your thoughts on what went on today, tell me about this breaking news.
Yeah, so here was what we have. We have now 339 pages of emails that Nellie Orr sent to Bruce Orr and his colleagues at the Justice Department. She essentially used her marital privilege, her relationship with her husband, to feed her fusion GPS research on Russia and Donald Trump and Paul Manafort and Carter Page and all the figures of the now debunked collusion scandal. She used that connection to feed her research right into the Justice Department to other prosecutors in the International Criminal Division. So a new backdoor, and the reason this is significant is twofold. One, it raises a real serious question of conflict of interest. Why is Nellie Orr sending Clinton-funded research to the Justice Department through her husband? And two, when she testified to the Hill last year in the deposition, she stated to the Congress that she did not share any of her Fusion GPS research with anyone outside of Fusion GPS, her husband and Christopher Steele. We clearly have a clear pattern here now of that Fusion GPS research, that Russia collusion research, going to Justice Department prosecutors who aren't her husband, but rather her husband's colleagues. So it's a pretty big development.
Would that mean she lied under oath?
One of the things I'm hearing, to be determined, but one of the things I'm hearing is that several House Republicans who participated in the interview with Nellie Orr last year are now preparing a criminal referral, asking the Justice Department to investigate and determine if she did lie to Congress in that deposition. So to be determined, but there's movement on that today as we speak.
Any more details that you can get into this? I mean, Fusion GPS, we learned last night, and this kind of shocked me and came out of nowhere, to be very, very honest with you. And I saw this with the Federalist reporting that Obama's political camp paid nearly $1 million since 2016 to Fusion GPS. Again, it raises more questions about what did the Obama White House know? When did they know it? Strzok and Page closed-door testimony brings the entire decision-making into Hillary Clinton's email server scandal right into the office of the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and also about meetings involving a lot of this in the Obama White House and Oval Office. I mean, where's this going?
Well, it's clearly going to go to a much larger question. We call it the boomerang, right? Now that we know that the Russia collusion narrative was bogus, it's been debunked. It was a political dirty trick. Now that we know that, I think the question is who participated and when did they know what was going on? And we now know for certain that Nellie Orr sent things like Carter Page was in Moscow and having a meeting and had some connections to Gazprom. She's forwarding that to the Justice Department months and months before the dossier comes out in public or do we hear about it. And so she's got this backdoor channel going into the Justice Department, just like Steele did when she went to Bruce Orr, her husband, and fed the dossier, just like James Baker had it when he took that information from the DNC lawyer and brought it into the FBI. There were all these channels flooding the FBI with this bogus research, and who knew what and how high did it go is going to be the question that will dominate the second half of 2019.
What was your reaction to the hearings today with the Attorney General?
A lot of political theater, but not much substance, right? Everyone threw their bombs. It was all for political ads. But at the end of the day, Bill Barr has a very compelling defense. If you think I was trying to mislead you, why did I release the whole report just a few weeks later?
Yeah,
it just doesn't hold up as a story. It just doesn't hold up. It's a bogus outrage.
Well, I mean, the fact that they last night, both the Washington Post and New York Times, they wanted to set up this fight for earlier today, but they even contradicted in the body of their articles the real emphasis, which is, okay, Barr got the letter from Mueller, and he called Mueller, and he asked Mueller, and Mueller emphasized that there was nothing in the Attorney General's March 24th letter that was inaccurate or misleading.
Yeah, I think the more interesting thing is why does Mueller feel the need to send this letter? If you're just worried about, hey, I explained why I did my declinations to the Attorney General, which was his real job under the law, that's all he's supposed to do, then who cares how it's spun in the press? It looks to me as though Mueller and his team were trying to control the political narrative. That's not something that prosecutors should be concerned with. And when you look at the letter, he literally is bragging that, hey, I wrote this in such a way you could release my beautiful prose just the way I wrote it. It's not how prosecutors are supposed to act. I'll defer to Gregg, who has such great legal background, but it does not feel like the sort of declination letter that's required in the court of law. It feels like it was a political play in the court of public opinion, and that really tarnishes Bob Mueller's legacy here.
Let me get to you, Gregg Jarrett, first reacting to John's article, Nellie Orr's Hi Honey emails and emails to the DOJ about Russia collusion raises an awful lot of questions about, again, this small group of people in every way, shape, manner, and form organized in this effort, number one, to rig Hillary's investigation, number two, to impact the 2016 election for the favored candidate, even willingness to use what the New York Times suggesting now is potentially Russian disinformation that Hillary bought and paid for. I'm hearing rumors, John, tell me if I'm wrong, that there might have been some meetings with Christopher Steele that will blow that part of this wide open in a way that nobody saw coming. I don't know.
I think you're right.
I have little sources, little birdies that talk to me a lot. I actually do some real work here. Nobody believes it. And then, of course, the effort to bludgeon the president with Hillary's bought and paid for potentially Russian disinformation. Gregg?
Well, kudos to John for getting more information about Nellie Orr. I lay out her role in my book, but now, thanks to John, we're getting a whole lot more information. When she testified, she only gave limited answers, and then she invoked the spousal privilege, which tipped me off immediately that she's only giving a sliver of what she did and knows. And so, she's in real trouble now because if it's true that, she was feeding information directly to prosecutors at DOJ and said otherwise, in her testimony, that's perjury. It's false and misleading statements. She better go hire herself a crack defense attorney like David Shawn because she's certainly going to need it. But they were all in on it. I mean, Nellie Orr and Bruce Orr were meeting in a hotel lobby for breakfast at the end of July, right after Steele had already met with the FBI and composed the first of his dossier memos. And from there on out, they were all feeding it to the FBI. And Steele and Simpson were meeting with more than a dozen journalists. And eventually guys like Isikoff and David Korn took the bait and published it. And later BuzzFeed published the whole dossier.
And David Schoen, I'm sitting here looking at you shaking your head. And then I want to get into a deeper question for all of you.
Yeah, listen, I think what John's report shows, if it wasn't shown before, is that the investigation probably should start with GPS, but it's a multi-pronged investigation. GPS, DOJ, the Clinton campaign. It has to be coordinated all in one package, it seems to me, with dogged prosecutors. But you asked also about the reaction to what happened today. It was a disgrace. Have you ever before seen members of the United States Senate engaging in these kinds of ad hominem attacks on the Attorney General of the United States who voluntarily showed up there? And you can see the attacks increasing the more they think Barr is serious about pursuing the truth here.
All right, this is now a very serious question. My conclude after all of this today is it's over. Whether the conspiracy lying media recognizes it or not, the Russia story is dead as it relates to Donald Trump. But the Attorney General was very clear that he is moving forward and investigating the Clinton investigation, FISA abuse. When did this start? The entire Russian narrative and Operation Crossfire Hurricane. And it seems like there's nothing now that's off the table. And Horowitz coming out next week. Who is in the most trouble and why? We'll start with John Solomon.
I think it's going to start with Christopher Steele. I think we're going to find out a lot more about his conduct and the possibility that he was setting up episodes to occur so that it would then create evidence that he could report back. But anyone who represented to the court that they did not have derogatory information on Christopher Steele when they submitted that FISA, everybody in the chain of approval, including Baker and Comey and Andy McCabe, are going to be held to a high standard because there will be overwhelming evidence within the next week that the FBI knew in advance of the FISA that Christopher Steele had a bias, that he was leaking information, and that he was trying to do it before the November 8th election. Those elements are so essential, so derogatory that they should have been disclosed to the FISA court. Anyone who hid that has committed a crime, as Greg has so eloquently described so many times before.
And Greg, you've gone through a list of specific crimes, but I would imagine that there's going to be some serious, really serious legal jeopardy for all of those people. I can't imagine that there's not going to be indictments here at a level we may not have ever seen before.
Yeah, I agree with John. I would start with Christopher Steele. There's already a criminal referral against him because he lied to the FBI and got fired for it. Now, he's a British citizen, so he's going to be protected by the British government, but you might be able to do a deal with him because they, the MI6 and the GCHQ were feeding information to CIA Director John Brennan and eventually the FBI. So in order to insulate themselves, they might convince the U.S. government to say, all right, we'll give you access to Steele. Steele will lay it all out. And then you go from there to Glenn Simpson, Nellie Orr, Bruce Orr, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, James Comey, the whole gang.
Is James Comey going to get indicted in your view? I believe that it is inevitable. Yeah, he's out with an op-ed today, as we discussed.
I think so. He not only stole government documents and leaked them, but he also signed off the first two FISA warrants, which even he admits the information was unverified. And the rules are very strict, as David Schoen can tell you. You can never use in a FISA application anything that's unverified.
David Schoen.
Yeah, I think that for me, at least, the Justice Department's got to be the place where they clean house first. First of all, there are so many regulations that they violated. They have such a higher duty to the American people, and so much flows from the infiltration of the Justice Department by political agendas. That's where FISA flowed from and so on. We've got to hold these people accountable. And again, to me, James Comey and others show this incredible arrogance. Brennan, people who have felt all along they're going to get away with what they've done. They have to be sent a message, I'm afraid.
All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll have more on this breaking news